Hey everybody, Ty here. Hope everyone is doing well. Hope you all have had a good Thanksgiving holiday. We have an interesting situation on our hands here as we're starting to see a Midwestern snowstorm really start to develop here, where a lot of these areas are expected to really get walloped here over the next few days. We did a live stream a couple of days ago over towards West Michigan, and looks like you guys are going to be in that point of interest as well, unfortunately. So, snowpack is really about to pick up in some of these states here. You can see this big swath of snow that we have over here towards Montana. Expect this to be moving off to the east over the course of the next couple of days. We already have plenty of watches and warnings out in advance of this as well. Widespread winter weather advisories and now winter storm warnings here in the pink that are continuing to be put in effect here, along with winter storm watches that will continue to be spreading across parts of the Northeast and particularly over towards the Midwest here. Lake effect snow has also been a pretty big problem, and I would expect that to continue over the course of the next couple of days. We still have lake effect snow warnings in effect from the last system, and like I said, we still have lake effect snow ongoing, especially to the south of Buffalo. But overall, we have a pretty big winter storm, and we also even have potential for severe weather down the line, and even snow squall warnings in Philadelphia here at this point. If you look really closely on the screen here, you can see where we have these lake effect snow bands pushing their way pretty far inland as well, might I say. And this is where our snow squall warning is. It's in effect for about another 20 minutes at the time of making this video. So if we were to exit out of this and take a look at the WPC's outlook for snowfall accumulation, it's a pretty significant forecast, particularly over towards parts of Iowa, Wisconsin, and even parts of Illinois here. So areas like Chicago, Des Moines, even Green Bay are going to be points of interest here. These areas in the blue that you're seeing, we could see up to 6 inches plus of snow, even potentially up to even a foot or more of snow possible of accumulation over the course of the next 36 hours here. And this area does eventually move its way off to the east here. So again, Grand Rapids, Gary, Indiana is going to be a point of interest as well going forward. And it's not really going to be until we get into Sunday night where things finally start to die down in regards to our snowfall and also our accumulation. We could give or take maybe about 5 or 6 hours, because this doesn't necessarily pick up on how the storm ends up progressing as it moves off to the east. But this will begin to weaken as we go forward throughout late Sunday, I would say, at this point. A lot of the action seems to be more so north of the border. Now, if we were to go ahead and take a look at our weather models here, the GFS and the Euro on the screen, what I want you to pay attention to particularly is just the overall activity that we're going to be seeing going forward. Even if you're in areas that will not be affected with winter weather here, like the deep south, we'll have potential for severe weather, and then we'll kind of be shifting back into the cold weather here. So or over towards the Gulf states over the next couple of weeks, we're going to be watching you guys for severe weather. And then whenever we see these troughs start to dip in like this, that's when it starts to get cold. Now towards the back half of these runs, things get pretty crazy here. It's not uncommon to see that, but one thing that I will say with this as well, and it kind of piques my interest just ever so slightly, is I'm going to let this go to the end of the model run for both of these, and I'm going to pause this on the GFS and the Euro and then eventually the GFS here, is that I do see a slight bit of continuity, which, while it's not enough to have me overly concerned, does increase my confidence just a little bit. Now, the time frame in which these two end up kind of occurring is a little bit different, which helps keep my confidence low as well. But you see both on the Euro right here and the GFS here, two major league troughs that come in right between the 10th and maybe the 13th here. And these look like they have the potential to be big time southern events. Now, the question that I have here is how much moisture will be in play, and just ultimately, if these trends even hold up, how much cold air will be funneling into these areas, because it doesn't look like there's much at first glance. But as we go further along and as this deepens, it could be a potential for maybe some snow on the backside of this if this were to come into play. Now, keep in mind, 372 hours out, you're almost talking a full 16 days. I can't tell you how many times I've seen runs like this, and potential for snowfall in the southeast, and these models flip at the drop of a dime, and basically either you get that miserable cold rain here towards the deep south or just nothing at all. So again, while I do see a mildly consistent signal, I will also say that this is so far out that there's no point in putting a whole lot of faith in this. But it is something that we will be paying attention to going forward here. Now, let's go ahead and take a look at the air masses here. And this is really going to be telling of what we have to expect going forward in regards to our cold air. So we'll go ahead and put the Euro on the screen here and get that moving first. And what I find most interesting about this is, again, GFS is pretty consistent with this as well. The biggest cold air masses really seem like they're going to start to pop up around mid-December here from the looks of it. Because regardless of whether or not we get winter weather, the amount of troughing that we were seeing at the end of that model run here, it does lead me to think that something is on the way towards the southern states. Now, just what that will be is still yet to be seen. But one thing that also kind of interests me is the fact that we do have that southeast ridge in play early on. And within the 200-hour range, this does start moving. Now, how far away this ends up moving and how far to the south this cold air ends up being pushed down is also going to be a determining factor as to what's to come. But one thing that I also will pick up on is some of these setups do kind of favor severe weather potential as well. And we'll get into that a little bit later in the video. But the fact of the matter is that collision of warm and cold air masses, especially within those first 200 hours here, wouldn't be surprised towards the Gulf Coast states if we had increasing severe weather potential. It could be starting a little bit sooner than what one may think here as well. Now, since we know that we have good continuity between the GFS and the Euro here, we're going to go ahead and just move on to the next thing here, and that's going to be the temperatures. Since we aren't, like I said, since we don't have a lot of discrepancy between data here, we're just going to kind of work with what we got. And of course, this doesn't want to work with me like I would want it to. But we'll go frame by frame on this here since we aren't doing a comparison. Now, obviously, as we know, we've had a cold couple of days over here towards the eastern half of the U.S. It's really over towards the southern plains where the temperatures have been best, along with the desert southwest here. In time, though, we'll even see a little bit of cold air try to sneak its way into the equation here as well. We still end up seeing plenty of 70s towards the far southwestern valleys here, and even towards southern California, but it is a notable difference even over there. And then we'll see another big cold push towards the beginning of December. And we're even going to start to even see some below zero temps beginning to show up, even as highs all the way over towards the Midwest here particularly. So we're going to start to see those wind chill advisories begin to come in within the next couple of days over towards parts of Minnesota, the Dakotas, even over towards Nebraska. We could even see the advisories begin to come in as far south as Kansas as well. So do be on guard for that over the course of the next week. We can even see those below zero temps really making their way into the northeast as well before all is said and done. And then eventually we start to warm up for a brief period before the next one comes in, which is right around the 8th here. We've been saying in the winter outlooks that December had all the makings of a really wild month, probably one of the coldest months yet for the season. Because technically at this point we're right at the edge of meteorological winter, but the other thing to remember is that the actual winter, the actual solstice, starts all the way in December 22nd. So technically fall isn't over. Now this look right here going forward on the 12th is what really piques my interest, because look at the gradient that we have developing here. We get 56 degrees right here, and then we always look back further off towards the west. We go from 56, 57 all the way to 35 in a pretty short time span here. With a powerful frontal boundary like this, you always want to watch the warm sector. Now, of course, like I said before, this is 300 hours out, and a whole lot can change with this. But if I were a betting man, if I was to watch anywhere for severe weather potential, this would be the place right here. this would be where I would look for the potential for maybe even all hazards at this point. Now, obviously, it's impossible to know at this range what to expect, but it's definitely something that kind of holds consistent with my thought on the collision between those warming two air masses and the other signals that we're seeing combined along with that. Now, let's go ahead and actually take a look at the Storm Prediction Center. We do have a marginal risk for tomorrow that even includes a marginal tornado threat. Here's our 2% area, mainly hanging around southeastern parts of Texas. Now, I don't expect a whole lot out of this. I do think that there's actually a small chance of this being upgraded to a slight risk. As far as any of the days beyond that point, there's nothing to really talk about currently. I haven't seen anything in the day 4 to 8 range that has really stood out to me. Day 5 and day 8 are predictability to low tags, but it doesn't really look like anything comes together based off the model data we've just looked at. Now, here's a look at when that severe weather potential may come in. We'll get a little bit more in depth with that in just a bit. But this is going to really be the main concern, is this wintry system that we're looking at that's begun to take shape at this point. If this low deepens, especially tomorrow, and pushes off to the north a little bit and interacts with that cold air, this is when we'll start to see some of the heavier snow begin to come in over towards the Midwest. And then as we continue to go forward, we'll see our point of interest shift over towards the northeast. And then we see our next system beginning to take shape as we get into the beginning of next month. We even see the potential for a little bit of a wintry mix over here towards northern parts of Arkansas before all is said and done. As this new low starts to pop up over here towards the Gulf, we have a little bit of remnant moisture left over making contact with this cold air. And this is where the Ohio Valley comes into play, and we may even start to see the potential for a nor'easter beginning to set up by the time we get into early next week. Then from that point, we see increased chance of showers and storms here. This is going to be more along the lines of cold rain, because look where the 32-degree line is. This is that first blue line right here. The 540 line is our freezing line. So you can actually see a little bit of potential for brief periods of freezing rain over here, but not much in the way of a big winter event in this case. But as we get further along in this model run, as you know, things got a lot wackier with the jet stream. So as a result, if you look at the precip map, here's the potential for severe weather. And then right behind that, looks like there could be potential for some winter weather also. Now, one thing that's working against that could be the fact that there's not much cold air in behind this that would help spark off any sort of winter weather here. But the thing is, the timing changes when you look at the Euro here. And this is probably the most cumbersome part of the forecast, is the fact that the further out in the range that we go, the less agreement we have available. Obviously, with us looking right now, at current time, the Euro is showing pretty good agreement with the GFS here. But as we go further along, especially as we get past 90 hours, is where things slowly but surely begin to change here. Here's our nor'easter. So it looks like at this point, if things don't change with this low pressure here, I would say that areas like New York City, Philadelphia could see a mix of rain switching over to snow in the back half of this. You may see some light to moderate accumulation with this. Nothing of major significance, because you guys have seen plenty of big snowstorms in the past. But we see a little bit of a change here by the time we get to about a week and some change out. We start to see another low pressure come in Alberta Clipper that will allow us to have more snow potential right around the 5th and into the 6th. And the cold air lingers for a little bit longer, so we end up getting a couple of different Clipper systems, start to see an increase in snowfall. And by the time we get towards the 10th, right around that 300-hour time frame, look what happens here. The cold air digs a lot further to the south. We end up maybe seeing a potential for a lot of snow around the Appalachia that could even make its way into the Tennessee Valley and maybe even the deep south before all is said and done, with wraparound snow making its way even towards the North Georgia mountains and parts of northern Alabama as well. Now, again, 300 hours out, can't put a lot of merit into it, especially with the GFS not matching with this. But it's another interesting scenario on what could be a very wild December, in my honest opinion, based off of these first looks here. Like I said, can't really put a lot of faith into long range model runs at 300 hours out. Even though we have gotten better over the years with it, still a long ways to go. Now let's shift our attention back to the severe weather side of things. So we're going to mainly put our focus on tomorrow since that's the most prominent threat that we have available. What I want you to pay attention to is the time frame between 22 to 0Z. We do have a little bit of CAPE available. So this is convective available potential energy. This is thunderstorm fuel. So we mainly have it a little bit further up towards the northwest. Some of the best dynamics I would expect the best shear. So dynamics seem to be a little bit more favorable there. And then as the front pushes further off towards the south, we can see some of these other areas be of interest as we get later into the evening, maybe even into the overnight. By that point, I think the threat really starts to slow down by the time we get towards about 8 to 10 o'clock. By that point, the sun's already set, so we could lose energy even beforehand. Now, if we were to go ahead and take a look at the dynamics right at about that time, we'll start out by looking at the low-level jet, and then we'll go ahead and add in the 700 here on the bottom left corner of the screen. I want you to pay attention to, if I can get this to work, please. There we go. I want you to pay attention to the short wave that pops up here. I'm going to try to drag you in a little closer so you can see that there. And then if we look here towards where the low-level jet is around the same time, it's not really a whole lot available over here. It's a little pocket that kind of develops here, and I think that's where our best potential for tornadoes might end up being. We could even see it shift a little further to the south here depending on how this low pressure ends up panning out. But ultimately, I do expect things to kind of remain on the lower end of the spectrum. There's a small chance that if we see an uptrend in instability, that we'll end up seeing a slight risk get issued. I still would expect mainly a wind-driven slight risk more so than a tornado threat, but we'll have to see how other dynamics come into play tomorrow. If it does go up to a slight risk, we'll make an update video first thing. Now, lastly, of course, we're going to go ahead and take a look at the composite reflectivity for the severe weather threat, and then we'll take a look at the snowfall totals. And it looks like the time frame here for when things would really start to pop off would be right about at sunset or just a little bit before then. We see things looking pretty quiet by the time we would be at about 4 p.m. Central Time. By the time we get towards 6th and 7th, these are when our first storms start to fire. And we will have to be watchful of any sort of isolated storms that pop up here. I think that further off towards the south is where we could still see the potential for a tornado, but it also is going to depend heavily on that storm mode. By the time the frontal boundary itself comes in, I would expect that tornado threat to drop off significantly and mainly consolidate into a damaging wind threat, with all the storms ultimately starting to fall off while we get towards the overnight hours in regards to its intensity going forward. So overall, like I said, severe weather threat going to be mainly localized. A couple of storms could show increased potential for severe. If we go ahead and take a final look at our snowfall totals over the course of the next 10 days, we have some big time totals, as I mentioned before, from Iowa stretching all the way into Michigan. Lake effect machine is going to be leaving its mark here, particularly over towards Lake Erie, Lake Ontario as well. And then maybe even towards the mountainous regions, we'll see some pretty notable snowfall here, potentially up to a foot or more as possible in some areas here as well. Towards the valleys, I would expect a little bit less in the way of snow, especially in the interior northeast. I would say that we would be looking at about maybe 4 to 6 inches over the next 10 days possible there. Nothing of major significance because up north, you guys are pretty well prepared for that. Ski season's really about to start to come into play here with these next few storm systems as well, especially if you're over towards the Rockies. We're expecting increased totals of snowfall there, and maybe even into the valleys here we could see a good bit of action. We're starting to see even potential for a couple areas that get 1 to 2 inches as well. So weather patterns are getting pretty active, folks. Let's make sure that you are doing what you need to do to be prepared if it is necessary. And of course, make sure you're keeping yourselves warm, keeping yourselves healthy throughout the season here, because we're going to probably be dealing with another flip pretty soon. Everybody have a wonderful rest of your Friday. Enjoy the time with your families, and I hope to see you all again soon. Take care.